Welcome to the Spike Camp podcast. Spike Camp is a free online community for hunters that support conservation. It's a great place to share stories and your experience with other hunters. As a member of Spike Camp, you get access to all of our hunting live streams, discussion channels, contests, hunter resources, and events that we host. Membership to Spike Camp is free. Our only ask is that you are a member of a hunting or conservation group before you register. Head over to spikecamp.com to join us. This episode of the Spike Camp podcast is brought to you in part by Alpine Riflecraft. Alpine Riflecraft is a Canadian firearms company that is redefining what an ultralight mountain hunting rifle should be. Their flagship product, the Zenith rifle, starts at 4.5 pounds and is the lightest carbon-barreled bolt action on the market today. Alpine Riflecraft rifles are 100% engineered, designed, and manufactured in Canada. To learn more, visit their website at alpineriflecraft.ca.
All right, I would like to welcome everyone to Sheep Camp. We have a great series lined up. First off, we want to give a shout out to Ozziak Equipment for the generous donation of an ultralight tripod, a head, and a bino clamp. His stuff is really cool. That's what we're gonna run some of his gear this trip on our sheep hunt. So looking forward to it. We're gonna draw the winner of that package on the 4th episode with Kevin Willis. So make sure you're registered with us for a chance to win. Tonight's show, we have our good friend Mike Drury on to talk about bighorn hunting. Mike is a hardcore sheep hunter from Alberta and is also the owner of Alpine Riflecraft. Mike has designed an incredibly lightweight, uniquely designed rifle with, I think, 99% of the components, Mike, manufactured in Canada. Is that right? Pretty
That's
close,
correct.
right?
Yeah, you bet.
Yeah, we're gonna talk sheep hunting first, and then we will swing over to rifles a little bit later on. So we've had you on before, but Mike, welcome back to Spike Camp.
Thanks for having me, guys. Yeah,
It's awesome.
I've been looking forward to this one for a couple weeks.
Yeah, well, we know this is your jam, so we thought for sure we want to get you on here. So kind of ironic, right? Here we are. We're sitting, I'm not sure what it's doing in Alberta, but out here in BC, we're sitting in a heat wave in middle of July practically. And what are we talking about tonight? Well, we're talking about late season bighorn hunting, right? So snowstorms, avalanches, all that fun stuff. So
yeah, exactly. I think it's 35 degrees here today where I'm at.
Yeah,
so warm.
I drove home from the Caribou from our property up there today, and the last 3 days our thermometer has been touching 40 up there, and through the Fraser Canyon we hit 40 a couple times today, and it's just gross. But anyway, it's a good time to talk about cooler weather. So
yeah, absolutely.
I was just gonna say, one of the people have asked me a couple times already, like, why'd you choose late season bighorn hunting? And Blake and I were in Alberta a few weeks back for a Wild Sheep Foundation event, and we learned an awful lot about the situation with the bighorn populations out there and how Alberta manages their hunts and how the sheep hunters, all the challenges you guys face. And I think it's safe to say when you look at sheep hunting, most of the species, 3 for sure of the 4 in North America, 4.5 if you want to get finicky on the designation between 2 of the subspecies. But early season sheep hunting, pretty much depending on species, is almost the same. Same program, right? You're getting out there early. You're trying to find where the rams are hanging out together. So there's really not a lot of differentiating factors with that. The thing with late season bighorn hunting, especially in Alberta, it's extremely unique situation the way things work out there. It's very challenging and can be very, very extreme. Mike, I know you've prepared some discussion points for us.
Yeah.
But before we jump into that, let's maybe tell the audience how long you've been in sheep hunting and what steered you towards becoming a late season sheep hunter, unless you started late season. I don't know that answer, but
yeah, sure. Yeah. I think I went on my first sheep hunt in 2002, So I was fresh out of university and, just trying to scratch together some gear and go hunting. And I went with a buddy of mine, and it's kind of a funny story. It was early season, and we basically stopped the truck at a sheep crossing sign and hiked up the mountain from there. So that's how sophisticated it was.
Mm-hmm. Nothing like a good hint dropped, right?
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, in those days without family, could hunt whenever I wanted. So I would really hunt the entire season, which is almost 2 months here. North of the Bow, it runs from August 25th to the end of October, and in the south, we're September 6th to the end of October. So Halloween
Okay.
being the last day. And I think the draw for me, the longer I hunted, was the fact that number one, obviously with weather, the game starts moving. You get snow, there's tracks, but also you get some of that migration happening from traditional summer range into what you'd call pre-rut, or potentially rut range. So there can be a lot of action. There can be a lot more action than your typical trying to find the summer hangout of rams and get on them early. Um, you can see different sheep every day, pretty much, if the conditions are right. Yeah, one of the other big drivers though was with bad weather, you start to see the resident sheep hunter numbers drop off. So you get that beautiful weather, people want to be out there, and maybe it's an Alberta thing, but people don't like being wet.
Well, it's true.
Yeah, it's true. And the end of the season, if it's nasty, cold, the snow's deep, more people tend to stay home. So to me, it's the perfect time to be out there. There's a lot of things that can line up, just right at the end of October in Alberta. And not that I've hunted the entire province, I haven't. Pretty much just the southern half. But I think the situation is similar. There's a lot of summer range within the parks, within the national parks or provincial parks, and that typically that late season time frame, the weather, you get rams moving out into areas where they can be hunted where they weren't necessarily present in the early season.
Yeah, I think apart from some spots throughout the southern half of BC, I think the Alberta situation that you guys have with the parks and all the private boundaries, whether it's mines or private land or whatever, that's got to make life interesting. And again, we learned a lot about how people hunt in some areas. They'll hunt the fringes, right, of the of those boundaries and wait for the rams to cross. I suppose that creates not only issues but also opportunity, right?
Yeah, entirely. I mean, the boundaries are fairly well marked, I think. So and with the technology we have today, it's not that hard to know where you are. But yeah, you're right. There's some travel corridors, and if you know where they are, some guys want to sit on them. I've always been the type of guy who has a bit of a different strategy, that I don't want to spend my entire week or my entire 10 days in one spot. Although I've done that. So yeah, there are many approaches, probably a different approach for everybody who's out there. But yeah, it is a unique situation when you've got rams that are on the move out of the parks and into the green zone where they can be hunted.
Yeah, I mean, let's circle back a little bit to the back to what you were kind of leading into with the attractions to the late season. You talked a little bit about how the snow and the cold puts sheep on the move in general.
Yeah.
One thing we learned, while we were on our little field trips out there, is the sheep have a pretty solid range as far as distance goes on migration for the most part. Those sheep, some move not so much, but most of them cover a lot of ground. So what are the challenges like there with pre-scouting? I guess if you're going to try pre-scouting, it's a pretty big adventure, right?
Yeah, I mean, scouting for the late season is very different than scouting for the early season hunts. You're not going to find rams in the same areas. Early season, you're really looking at core summer range, and there is not that there isn't a lot of it, but there is a limited amount outside of the parks. And so scouting for the late season sheep, you're really, the best ways I've found to do that myself is really draw, your elk and your deer tags in those same zones for November, and get boots on the ground, be out there hunting, be looking. You want to be finding where those sheep wind up, and you can hunt the areas in between. And obviously, we're talking they might travel 20 miles, they might travel 40 miles from typical summer range to where they're going to rut or pre-rut. So it's they're big landscapes, and honestly, that knowledge is probably why so many sheep hunters don't like to talk about where they're going sheep hunting, right? It's hard fought knowledge to gain over years and years and years of experience, typically.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's definitely some advantages, right? When you do get that snow on the ground. Maybe you could tell us 100%. A little bit about the tactics involved with that.
Yeah, sure. Generally, I would say you want to, a lot of guys do backpack hunts, point to point. Typically, you want to be hunting your way south to north in those situations if you can, or at least hunting more of the south, southeast, southwest facing aspects. In those areas, typically, right, if you've got cold weather and snow, that's where you're going to see the snow be removed by the sun, the solar aspects first. Typically, that's where you're going to find sheep. So in general, that's one of the things you want to try and do is find those areas that are going to be snow free first, or wind blown. And there are areas that are not south aspects, which are windswept and hold sheep in those times of years. But it's sheep would rather graze than have to dig for it. So that's a key piece for sure. I mean, part of what I love is that you get a good snow on the ground and you have a bright sunny sky. I mean, you can see forever. If it's cold, a lot of times you'll have a lot less heat wave issue, glassing long distances. And I think the one cool aspect about it is the ability to find tracks in very distant places and follow those to sheep. I've glassed so many sheep over the years that I honestly never would have found without being able to see their tracks in the snow. When you're talking 5+ kilometers of distance away.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine just trying to work your way through without the track advantage. It must be tough trying to find them, period. That's some good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, that is one of the challenges. I'll say this late season, right? If you don't have much snow and you get the patchy snow, and now you've got a mix of white and brown everywhere, it can be very challenging to glass bighorns. The white butts don't stand out, and neither does the brown bodies. So yeah, they really blend in well in those situations when there's a mix of ground cover.
Do you find their behavior changes once the snow flies, apart from obviously hitting the road, but as far as feeding habits and things like that, do they change it up?
Definitely. Early season, especially in southern Alberta, right? Our timber line's fairly high here. I'm 20 years ago, I thought I needed to focus on the high alpine open stuff, and that's generally not where the sheep are holding. There's a lot more sheep in the timber, out of the sun, on shaded aspects, and many times you're not going to see them until the last light of the day. A great example is last year we sat on a big draw for 4 hours the day before opening day, and last 10 minutes of light, a ram popped out maybe 300 yards away, fed for 5 minutes, laid down, got back up, went back in the timber. So those early season habits, if you get lucky enough to have the weather line up and you've got 8, 10 or more inches of snow on the ground, and you've got we'll call it -10 or lower temps. We've had some really good hunts like that the last few years where we're down -15, -20. Then you see sheep feeding essentially almost all day. They'll lay down here and there, but afternoon they'll be in the wide open feeding. Morning they'll be in the wide open feeding. They're not going to be hiding in the timber, or much less so. And they're going to be generally on those solar aspects. That isn't always the case, but definitely more the case than early season. So it really gives you some advantage in finding rams.
Yeah, and I imagine too, your days are so much shorter, right? Like what's a typical hunting, amount of hours that you would have in a day that time of year?
Yeah, that's good. It's probably at that point in the season, we're probably talking, you've got half, right? You've got 12 hours at most. So there's a lot more time in the tent and hiking in the dark. What it does give you is the advantage to get somewhere and get into into position to glass while it is still dark. So you can more opportunity to maximize your time, the time that you do have, I suppose, rather than early, where if you want to be on it, first light and last light, those are going to be long days.
Yeah.
I actually find that the late season, the conditions can be much worse, but I'm usually more rested just because of how much darkness there is.
Tent time. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So on those late season hunts, what's a typical duration of a trip for you? I mean, I guess it depends on work and stuff, but in general, what do you like to commit?
I like to commit at least 5 days. To me, the ideal is 8 to 10 days. Generally, the weather windows don't last that long anyway. I usually try and, if it looks like there's weather coming, I might go early. I might not wait till the last week. If it's going to be, if we're going to have snow and cold, maybe you try and get out a week early to really hit the weather and take advantage of that movement. I think that's a key. But yeah, obviously, the more time you can spend, the better. Who doesn't love being in sheep country? I'd be there for 2 months if I could.
For sure. Yeah. Life has a way of getting in the way of that. For sure.
Yeah.
Exactly. So we're gonna get to gear and stuff a little bit later on the agenda here, but
Yeah.
just curious, do you move your camp around once you get up top? I guess it depends on what you're seeing, right? Is it sort of a flexible thing?
Yeah, it depends on the area too. I mean, I've hunted some areas where, you don't have to move far in a day. You're kind of in a high elevation central location where maybe you run this ridge a kilometer or two in one direction, and you can literally spend the day there, or the opposite direction, and you don't have to move that far. But typically, my approach has been, there's a plan A, B, and C. I'm going to try and hit these high traffic areas, high traffic for sheep, that is.
Yeah.
And if I go somewhere, and this is a great example. A few years ago, we had awesome weather. Day one, we got into a spot at the end of the day. We saw 21 rams that day.
Wow.
3 different bands of rams. A couple legal, but none were shooters. So the next day we went 10K up the valley, checked another spot, saw 2 rams there, and then pulled out and went, got back in the truck, drove to a completely new area. It was basically like the weather had been perfect for 2 days. We felt like we saw what there was to see there.
Right.
And then, packed into a new spot and hunted that. But, if you're in a good location and the weather's right, and maybe nothing showed up yet, they're probably not far off. If you know the country and you know how the rams move through the area, a lot of times it's a patience game.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, like you say, it's all about timing, and you've got to it's like fishing a little bit, I guess, for you guys too. If you've got the ability to pull out, jump in a truck,
yeah,
blow a day to get to a different area, that's certainly manageable. Northern BC and those big hunts, that's obviously not quite as easy, but I think the Kootenays is probably, depending on the area, it's probably a similar situation to that. Do you ever run in, this is just sort of a question I just thought of, if you're hunting in snow, do you ever have, I know it's super competitive there, have you had guys follow your tracks into certain areas? Has that ever happened?
Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure. And to be honest, I tend to think that people who are out there that time of year are they're obviously out there for the same reasons you are, and I've only ever had good experiences running into other sheep hunters that time of year.
Yeah, it definitely, it probably filters the quality a little bit better, right? You get the hardcore guys that are there. They're not there because they like to freeze and be tortured.
Yeah. Not like me.
Yeah. Well, they actually do like it, or they wouldn't be there.
That's right.
Right on.
Yeah,
Cool.
exactly.
Good stuff there. Let's talk a little bit about the differential between a late season versus early, and we could talk a little bit more on, the gear and stuff like that. Maybe talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. I think, early season, generally it's all about going as light as possible. Right? You can get away with a lot early season. Even if you get a dump of snow, generally the weather isn't staying cold for long. If it dips down to freezing or thereabouts, lots of guys are running a super light pad and maybe a tarp style tent and a quilt. Maybe leave some of the other layers at home, some of the additional gear at home, and you don't have that margin for error when it comes to late season hunting. Last year I think we had 3 nights in a row that were below -20 Celsius.
Wow.
So you gotta have the right stuff when you're hunting in those conditions. You gotta have an excellent bag, insulation underneath, Some of the things that are in my pack late season that don't necessarily make it in there at other times are micro spikes. Those are, I ran before micro spikes before they were available. I actually used to take crampons with me, but they're heavy and clunky, and they're generally super overkill for the most extreme stuff. Micro spikes are awesome. You get snow on those grassy slopes. They'll grip frozen rock. It's can't leave home without the micro spikes.
Yeah, game changers, right?
For sure. I know lots of guys don't hunt with 2 hiking poles. To me, that's an absolute must late season. Just traversing that country makes it so much easier having your upper body engaged. Not to mention on a pack out, especially in deep snow, the stability you get. Yeah, and then obviously gear for warmth. I bring a balaclava. I'm wearing a toque, not a baseball hat. I've got a set of pretty heavy duty black diamond mitts that are -40 rated. Insulated jacket, insulated pants. I run the First Light Uncompagre jacket and pants, and they're synthetic. They've been excellent. Always bring the rain gear. At that time of year in Alberta, it's wind gear, and keep the wind chill off you. That's definitely a challenge late season at times, is being able to stay put to glass. Generally, if you're in the same country the sheep want to be, it's windswept, and there can be times where you've got everything in your bag on, and you're just sitting there freezing for hours behind the glass trying to keep it together. But if you don't bring that gear, I mean, you don't stand a chance in those conditions. So at the end of the day, you're going to be packing more weight, not only gear, but you're going to be packing more food for the same number of days. I typically bring 500 calories a day more in food, just to make up for that deficit when it's cold, and that seems about right for me. But yeah, tents, lots of guys run the same tents early and late. I don't. We've got a hot tent now, so I'm running a single wall teepee with a cylinder stove in it, and that has been a game changer for sure. You can, once it's dark, you're not sitting outside of your tent, making dinner or doing whatever, trying to keep warm until it's time to shut her down. You can be indoors drying your gear out, comfortable. It's fantastic, especially on those really cold hunts.
Yeah, big morale booster too, right? You've been freezing your ass off all day on the mountain.
Yeah.
Rough day, and then you come back to that hot stove with a hot cup of coffee or chocolate, your food, roast your hands. I can only imagine, for sure.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's been a big one. And I mean, there's some challenges with stove tents too. Single wall tents, the amount of condensation you get in them, and obviously when it's really cold, just how much condensation you get from your breath in those tents, no matter how well you want to ventilate it at night. So you're constantly trying to manage moisture. Late season, oftentimes we'll pull the bags out of the tent in the morning and wipe down the inside of the tent, knock all the frost out of it. What generally can happen, you're camped in some nice solar aspect, so you get some good afternoon sun, and if you haven't done that, you'll come back and it's been raining inside your tent all afternoon.
You're soaked. Yeah.
and your bags are soaked. So synthetic bags are great. I've got a gore covered down bag, which is fantastic as well. But yeah, definitely some tenting considerations there to be able to stick it out. Any bag you bring is going to pick up moisture in those conditions, but it's really about how do you manage it. And having a stove in the tent, if the foot box on your bag gets a little damp, you can dry it out, right? You can dry your socks
Real
out.
quick.
It's a game changer for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Blake, you want to drop a couple questions here, I think, right?
Yeah, we got a couple in the chat. So, Brecken was asking you, Mike, what's your system for glassing for sheep? Are you the kind of guy that will work with binos first, and then once you find sheep, pull out the spotter, or are you pretty dedicated to sticking with the spotter the whole time?
It really depends on distance. Inside of a couple kilometers, I'll be on my binos primarily until I find something to look at with the spotter. Basically, if I can pick it up and it's going to be a reasonable size in the glass with the 10 power binos, then I'm going to be on the binos. Once I get past that, then I find much greater utility in the spotting scope for sure.
Are you running your binos on a tripod, Mike, when you're doing that?
I am. Yeah, I am. Yeah, I've it's probably been 4 or 5 years now. I got the Outdoorsman post system, their stud and post system. Yeah, there's lots of them out there now, but it's pretty fantastic.
It really does. It has so many advantages, not only from a stability perspective, but just ergonomics and eye strain. And I guess the other thing too, especially another consideration is, like you said, if it's cold and you're sitting with your fingers pointing up all the time, then you got to have both hands up there. It doesn't matter if you got minus 40 mitts or not, you're going to lose some circulation and you're going to freeze those hands. You're going to be shaken. Yeah, for sure.
Eventually. Yeah, that's
Eventually,
right.
Yeah.
So being hands free with the binoculars is pretty important. Yeah, you don't want to be glassing with a spotting scope if you're only talking 1,000 to 1,500 yards away. And yeah, to be hands free, even if you have the big mitts, you can tuck them in somewhere. Yeah, you're comfortable, right?
Yep.
Yeah,
sure.
whatever you can do to stay on the mountain longer.
Yeah, for sure.
I was also going to add, what is your we've got a few more questions to get through on the chat, but regarding glassing, what's your criteria for when you're following tracks? Like you were saying earlier, you'll spot tracks in the snow, and that's a pretty good tip for locating sheep. But do you ever chase down tracks without seeing sheep, or are you very patient to just sit there and like I can imagine some places you see lots of tracks and then others you see very little. Is there any kind of strategy to it?
For sure. I mean, I'm not going to go on a 5K plus jaunt to go see what's on the end of a track, unless I see it go somewhere where I would expect rams to be. But yeah, generally I've found, you need the right light, the right time of day, and eventually whatever has made those tracks. Generally we're talking, you're going to find those tracks in the afternoon sunlight, right? Once the sun's up high enough, you start seeing those tracks. Later in the afternoon, it's like the 2 o'clock, 7th inning stretch, they'll get up and that's when you find them.
Right.
So it's about being patient.
Yeah.
And waiting out that, even late season, especially you get a bright sunny day, even if it's cold, they're still going to bed down out of sight. You wait for that afternoon, they get up and feed, you'll spot them. So yeah, more of a patience game for sure. Yeah, you can, I guess the best part is, or the best situation is a new snowfall, right? Within the last within the last day or 2 days, and then you're talking you're dealing with fresh tracks.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that makes
It
sense.
gets super confusing, right? If things have been traveling back and forth over the course of days. Yeah, definitely not as much value there, but at least you know where the game is.
Totally.
Yeah. Exactly.
What about thermals? Ryan was asking, do thermals factor in during late season for you? And maybe also, I'm curious, like, what's the average temperature range that you're working with on a late season hunt?
Yeah, that's well, I'll say thermals are definitely a big deal. What you're going to find is that upslope is just going to start later in the morning, but you're still going to get those upslope winds happen once the air temp warms up. So you got to play it the same way that you would early season for sure. Sorry, the second half of that was
Temperature. What's
right.
a hunt temperature you deal with?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think I've done one hunt in Catamount. A friend of mine, his wife had the tag. It was the last hunt in November, so it was like November 23rd to the 30th. We had minus 20 to minus 25 all week, and then the last day was, I think it was minus 38 in the morning. So,
Cold.
very cold. And she killed an absolute hammer of a ram at last light on the last day. It was 186. Rut finally kicked in. But yeah, and I've hunted October 28th, and it's 20 degrees out, and you're in a t-shirt, right? It's tail end of beautiful summer weather. So huge variety, right? But yeah, there's basically like backpacking. If it's minus, I don't know. I guess it's never been too cold for me to go. I just prepare differently.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and that time of year, you probably have a pretty good handle on the 10-day forecast is going to be pretty close on the severity side, right? As far as the weather goes. So
yeah.
Still some variables.
Yes. Yeah, for sure.
Well, let's knock a couple more up, like what we got them.
Sure.
So we don't leave them hanging.
Thomas was asking, how much heavier is your winter pack with extra clothes and food?
Not a lot heavier. We're probably talking 5 to 7 pounds. So there's a chunk of weight there, but it's not, it's by no means crippling. In fact, that would be on the high end.
Right. With regards to that, Mike, you and your partner, do you share a lot more gear, i.e. optics and stuff like that, spotter, or do you change that style of gear list at all for that?
I don't. I mean, the things that we share early season, we share late. I don't believe that you're doing yourself any favors by sharing optics. Me personally, like I would never want to go on a hunt and not have my own spotter. I feel like you can just cover so much more country if you and your partner are, each have your own setup. And it makes it more fun too, right? Like it's always a bit of a competition.
Who finds the sheep? Exactly.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, my partners and I, we've never left rifles or spotting scopes or any of that gear at home. It's always been full load.
Yeah, right on.
Yeah.
What about, do you ever pack rope for snow or just sticking to your micro spikes?
Yeah, that's a good question. So there have been times where I have packed rope. There's some specific areas where I like to bring a rope if I'm going there. But generally, I wouldn't generally bring rope. I mean, I've never hunted mountain goats, but I don't believe we're typically hunting terrain that's that crazy. There's a few places for avalanche safety purposes, or you get in a steep scenario with really slippery ground cover, that verglass, you get the wind and the sun on the snow. It can be dangerous. So I've had a rope in some of those situations when I know that could be a possibility, but it's not typically in my pack.
Right.
Let's maybe get at least one more here from Clay. So with the late season at pre-rut, have you located rams by their head butts?
I never have. So I've definitely heard them, but it's, hear them butting heads, but it's been after I've spotted them.
Right.
Yeah. So that would be pretty darn cool, though.
That would be cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
And generally I find like in October, they're not that keyed up yet. They're kicking each other in the nuts and jostling around and doing all that stuff. But, during hunting season, I haven't seen anything like what you see end of November, early December, right? When they are actually rutting and you've got, full on headbutting going on. Right
on. Cool. Well, let's okay. We'll circle back to some questions here in a little bit. Back to the like the actual camping and stuff. How do you manage water that time of year? That's got to be an interesting challenge.
It is, yeah. Last year, I did a hunt. It was only a few days, but everything was frozen solid. So we basically had to burn fuel to melt snow. So that you waste a lot of time doing that, and time and energy, just trying to get water. Typically, though, you'll either find an open creek, or you'll be able to chip through a lake and get water. I guess the good thing about there being snow on the ground is typically it hasn't been super cold ahead of that. So there's generally still groundwater available running off. So it hasn't been a big issue. I think the bigger issue is your proximity to water and your water freezing overnight. I always have a MSR dromedary bag with me. If it's full and I leave it in the tent during the day, it's basically, on an insulated pad off the ground, and it'll generally ice over at the cap, but you break that loose and then you're good to go. But yeah, there's definitely some challenges with water. I generally run a hand pump style filter, and yeah, those don't work very well when it's below zero.
Yeah, game over for that. You're taking chances, or your tabs or something.
Freeze up real fast. Yeah, or if you're in a good spot, lots of times I don't use anything, but you're always taking a bit of a risk there, I suppose. But yeah, the filter stays at home when it's going to be cold, because you might get a few pumps in and then it's toast.
Wow. So what, on that note, what kind of gear failures? I suppose you've had a few over the years as you test, right? Try to figure out your kit.
Yeah. Down bags. I've always loved down bags, just for the weight and the packability. But I've had a few times with non-Gore-Tex bags where, you're out long enough that they pick up moisture, and by the end of the hunt, you're trying to find a way to dry the thing out. You're hanging it in a snow-free tree on a sunny day, hoping the wind and the sun can bake some moisture out of it. I've had some really nasty cold nights with a with a damp down bag where you've got all your insulation on inside the bag. So that's a key. I mean, you should have a synthetic bag, or, I mean, the good thing about Alberta is it's typically not super humid, right? Low humidity. So I think that having a down bag with a gore liner or a treated down bag is, it'll do the job. And of course, synthetic, no issue. But standard down bag, if you're out there for more than a couple days, you're probably going to run into issues when it's cold.
Yeah, for sure. So you run you said a gore liner, like a sleeping bag liner inside the down. That's your strategy.
Sorry, I shouldn't say that. It's a gore shell.
A shell goes over the outside of it. Yeah.
Yeah. My I bought my late season bag is a Western mountaineering bag that I bought probably 10 years ago before the dollar got real ugly. So, but yeah, it's a gore shell bag. And it's awesome. It'll have frost on it in the morning on the exterior, and you knock it off and carry on.
And it's down inside.
You bet. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. Those bags are expensive, man. Hey.
Oh, yeah. Buy once, cry once, right?
Yeah, I do that a lot. I don't know if I'm buying more or crying more, but I do that a lot. Blake's laughing because he knows. He's heard me say it. Dad, he said, "Dad, you buy once, then you sell it, and then you buy once again." So.
Yeah. I mean, tents are a good thing to talk about here. As far as gear failures, there's been many times we're out and you're going to see, you might get 12 inches of snow overnight. Worst case scenario, you get rain first and then it freezes and your tent fly is already 10 pounds heavier with a sheet of ice on it, and then you get a foot of snow on top of that. I mean, you find out real quick what 3 season means when you have those kind of conditions. So lots, I've borne witness to tent collapses and broken poles. Generally.
So,
go ahead, Chuck.
I was just gonna say. So you mentioned the teepee tent. What are you guys running? So it's two people primarily, right?
Yeah, it's 2 people fit comfortably with gear and a stove in it. It's a seek outside tent. It would probably be similar to what is their Cimarron model now, but it's an older tent. Came out pre those tents, or their current offering. But it's been really good. Generally, it sheds snow well, down to the last 18 inches of wall, and then you'll get some buildup. But guys trying to go light on 3 season tents where you've got one ridge pole. To me, if you're going to hunt late season, you need a 4 season tent or a teepee. You're going to have a bad scenario sooner or later, and not that it's that serious. It just might, you just might be super uncomfortable and waste a bunch of time, and worst case, you might have to end your hunt early.
Yeah, exactly. Drive you off the mountain.
Yeah.
What about with the teepee? Are you running a ground cover of any kind inside?
Yeah. So generally, I always run something in there. Especially late, what you find is you're running the stove. You're gonna melt the ground around the stove. A lot of times, you'll get you just want to keep the mud, if you get any mud or snow melt, off your gear. I don't know. I like a clean camp, clean gear. We actually started the last couple of years. We've had an ultralight insulated tarp.
Oh yeah.
So it's minimally heavier than a standard tarp, but it does a much better job of keeping you off the cold.
Is that a camping product, or is that a something else? Like, where would you find something like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a camping product.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's not something that you're going to find at you know, any of the typical outlets.
You got to search for it.
You got to search for it. Yeah, and I honestly can't remember where. My partner is the one who bought it, so I couldn't tell you where he got it from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of an interesting segue into something I wanted to talk to you about. Your hunting partner, your sheep hunting partner that does these extreme hunts with you. Do you guys hunt like everything together, or is he like the crazy sheep guy that goes out in the cold weather with you? Like,
We'll do other hunts too.
Yeah.
But and it's not. There's probably. I guess I'll call myself lucky. I've probably got. I'll say 3 good buddies who
Yeah.
It doesn't matter which one of them I'm on a hunt with. Sometimes there's been 3 of us do a trip together, right? But you find those guys who doesn't matter what the conditions are, doesn't matter what the situation is, nobody complains, and everybody's having a good time. Those are the guys you want, right?
Yeah, they share the same pain.
Yeah. Well, and mental toughness, like
exactly.
It's nothing's going to stop you.
Yeah. And that's where it gets tested, is under those extreme conditions, like with the gear failure. Brecken asked a question I was going to ask in my next round here: is any of those gear failures actually drive you off the mountain? Have you had any abort mission situations?
Yeah, so I had this is a long time ago. I actually had it was an early season hunt. It's probably 15 years ago now. And, I had an ultralight 1-man tent, and I was hunting solo, and we had a rain event, and then a big dump of snow. So it basically soaked the fly. It was a, silicone impregnated fly, and it got heavy and wet, froze, and then my tent was crippled after that. And essentially what happened is as the fly collapsed onto the tent body in the night, all that moisture just ran into the tub floor of the tent, and my bag was and a standard down bag. It was essentially waterlogged the next day. So that was a good learning experience.
I bet. Is there a piece of gear that is to you like the most important piece out of all that?
Just specifically for late season hunting?
Yeah, late season. Yeah.
Yeah. Honestly, I would say insulated pants.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people discount keeping their lower body warm. I've hunted with guys before who have like 4 jackets, but they don't have anything to put on the bottom. And, that single item has allowed me to sit out, with my wind gear on over top in some absolutely brutal conditions and stay on the glass and find sheep where, you'd probably be so frozen you couldn't walk yourself off the mountain.
So
yeah, those are key.
They're insulated pants. Like what are you running? What are the brand and stuff?
Yeah, they're the First Light. I believe it's the Uncompagre pant, and so they're like a zip on, zip off style pant. They're synthetic, and I mean, there's a ton of different brands out there that make make these good pants. Doesn't matter what you pick, but yeah, they're absolutely key.
Do you bring puffy pants too for inside as another layer?
Well, those are essentially my puffy pants.
Those are, yeah, okay.
Yeah. So if I'm going to sit in glass for a long period of time, it starts by gearing up, putting the puffy layers on, probably putting the rain gear on over top, and really settling in.
And those pants, you could wear them to hike with and stuff, and you wouldn't have to worry about them they're pretty durable. They don't get ripped up in the bush.
Yeah, they're pretty good.
Yeah.
But I mean, generally you wear them for once you start moving again, even in the coldest conditions,
Mm-hmm.
they're coming off at some point. You're going to overheat.
You will, yeah. They
Yeah.
don't breathe that well, right?
No, but
You
they're
don't
sure
want them
nice to. They're nice to warm up in. I mean, a lot of times you sit there you'll sit there for, say, you're
Mm-hmm.
stationary for 4 or 5 hours in an afternoon, right till dark, and it's, temperature drops back down to -20. I'm
Mm-hmm.
probably wearing those for a while until I get the blood flowing again.
For sure.
Yeah.
Just one more gear question here, or kit related question before we jump into actually hunting.
Yeah.
Clay asked a question again that was one that was on my list. Rifle. How do you treat your rifle as far as how do you prep it for the hunt, degrease it, lubricate it, all that stuff? I mean, this is
Yeah.
a gunsmith question now. So
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't ever, it doesn't matter what rifle I've had. I always fully clean my firing pin assembly. So it's
mhm,
coming out of the rifle. I don't want any grease in there whatsoever. I'll either run like a spray on PTFE lube, like a thin layer of that, or some synthetic gun lube, like a couple drops. I know some guys use dry lube on their firing pin assemblies as well, like a molybdenum type powder.
mhm,
But basically, you don't want anything in any quantity enough that could gel up, freeze, do anything
sure.
like that. So, very, very little. Use it very sparingly. I'll still put some synthetic oil on my lugs.
Mhm.
A tiny bit before I go, but yeah, it's really about keeping lube to a minimum.
For sure. What are you degreasing with as a rule? What do you use?
I mean, you can brake clean is fantastic if you're buying a new
That's
factory
good.
rifle that's full of not they're full of cosmoline now, but it'll
Mhm.
essentially strip anything. Even
Yeah.
WD-40 is a good degreaser.
Mhm.
Um, you
Carb
know,
cleaner probably is also another one.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure.
And then
But yeah,
is there, I don't think there is, but do you run, do you do anything with your optic? I started playing around. I'm testing some stuff that came out of I picked up out of the States. It's like a scope tape,
okay,
exterior protection that wraps around your scope.
yeah,
Those, you can buy bandages that I think now that are like almost like a tensor bandage that are sticky but not adhesive, right? You can roll it
yeah,
around. So far, I was shooting my rifle here the other day, and I had a couple sections of it come undone. And the problem was I installed it after I had it on the rifle, so it was difficult to wrap,
oh
to
yeah,
wrap it.
tight,
So,
yeah,
yeah. So I think what I'm going to do, I'm not going to do anything before the sheep hunt because as anybody that's been following me knows, I've been having issues just getting my dope and stuff figured out. I'm not messing with this gun; it's shooting right where I want it. But I think when I get my rifle from you, I'm gonna wrap that stuff around the scope, and it just adds a little layer of protection.
yeah,
I think like anything, and this is an observation from my history in Saskatchewan hunting whitetail late November for 20 years where it was -40.
yeah,
I think things, well, I don't think, I know for sure things break easier or things go wrong easier in cold weather, right? Is there any
yeah.
kind of scope protection? Are you running like a neoprene until shoot time, or how do you run that?
Yeah, so generally, I generally always tape my muzzle.
Yeah.
Um, you know, keep anything out of the business end. But for a long time now, I've been keeping my rifle in one of the solo hunter covers.
Yep.
Especially when you're dealing with a lot of snow, right? You're going through the bush and you're constantly having it, pour off branches onto you. Um, you definitely don't want that getting in your action and then warming up later in the day. Um,
hmm
you know, keeping the water out of it when it's cold is important. I think those things are fantastic. They weigh like 6 ounces or something. So, yeah, I'm using it full time. And sometimes I'll have a neoprene scope cover on my scope under it.
Yeah, good stuff. Good stuff. Any more questions do we have out of that pool of questions, Blake? I don't think so. Oh,
It looks like we just got one come in from Ryan. When using a hot tent, do you leave the rifle outside to prevent temperature changes?
I haven't. Generally, I bring my rifle into the tent with me, and it, you know, I've never been too concerned about some condensation. But what you'll find with hot tents in cold weather is anything, next to the tent wall and ground level is not going to warm up anyhow. That's it's a huge consideration what you put next to the wall, because it's gonna
get
probably
cold.
get cold. So yeah, I've got my rifle in the tent. It's in its solo hunter cover, so it's going to shed any water that gets on it. But yeah, I've never been worried about that.
Mm-hmm.
And I like having it indoors, in bear country.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. All right. Well, let's talk about some strategy stuff and game plan, things like that. You had a pretty good program going there that you sent me earlier. Let's have a chat about that.
Yeah, sure. I'll look at my notes here too. So I touched on it earlier. I think one of the key things is in late season is hunting different areas than you normally would, right? You want to be able to search out those pre-rut areas, and I say that and make it sound easy, but it's not. Ultimately, the best way to do that for me was, my friends would call me crazy, but I would always burn up my tag priority on mountain hunts. So whether it was elk or mule deer, I'd be hunting those species in November in the same zones that I would hunt sheep. And it just allows you to be, they're essentially, especially mule deer, I mean, they're basically in the same country that the sheep are. So mule deer hunting in the mountains for me was a lot of that was purely out of trying to learn where the sheep are come November.
Right.
And after enough time, you start to piece it together. You start to find those areas where the pre-rut and rut range is and winter range is, and you start to build that mental map of where they're coming from and where they're going to, and where you should be,
Sure.
depending on time of year and weather.
Mm-hmm. So the mule deer and the elk tags were more accessory than priority, right? You're just
for a long time. Yeah, for a long time. Yeah, I had I've taken a lot of flack from my wife over the years about coming home empty-handed with deer and elk tags, because I'm essentially still hunting sheep. But yeah, it gets you in the country and gives you an excuse to be there.
Yeah, that's what we refer to as the obsessive sheep hunter, which, anybody who's probably watching is an obsessive sheep hunter. One of our guests coming on episode 4, you could say, is obsessive. He had a perfectly good career earning a lot of money, and he kept that career and bought a jet boat transporter business in northern BC so he could be in sheep country a lot more. So that's obsessed.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Right.
Mitch Kendall had a quick question here on optics. Was wondering what you're running, your size, and make, model, that kind of thing.
Sure. So, oh man, I'm gonna out myself as as an old timer here, even though I might not look it. So for the up until last year, like when I built the Zenith rifle, when I started hunting with that this past season, I hunted with that rifle. I had a Leupold 4.5 to 14 1-inch tube scope on it, and I've always believed that the ranges of the distances I'm shooting, which is I'll call it 500 and in, is where I'm comfortable. That's more than enough for me. I really don't want to pack any more weight than necessary. But that's just the 1 year. The prior probably 8-9 years, I've actually been doing all of my hunting with a Leupold FX3 fixed 6-power 6x42 with an elevation turret on it, and just a standard duplex reticle.
Does that scope come with a turret, or did you have Korth put it on?
I had Korth put an M1 elevation turret on it for me. It weighs about the same as that variable does, but I just love the simplicity.
Well, I mean,
and I've taken game out to, I think the farthest was 420 yards.
Right.
So, and don't get me wrong, guys love gear, and the optics these days are just incredible. I guess the thing I lean on when I'm choosing a scope for a backcountry hunt is, I'm probably going to look through that scope for, at most, if I'm waiting for an animal to get up, an hour. So does that scope have the utility to get me on target with the ranges I'm comfortable shooting? If it does, honestly, there's a lot of choices out there that'll get it done.
Yeah, that's an interesting rabbit hole when you look at fixed versus variable. You don't hear that discussion as much as you did 15, 20 years ago. My dad used to tell me that, if you got a 3 to 9 power scope and you're hunting in cold weather, you've got 8 opportunities to screw up.
Right.
Because he said, like, the older erectors didn't always work right in the scopes, right? So he's like,
yeah,
pick one, sight it in on that one. He didn't like messing around with the turrets. And then when the elevation dials and the zero stops started showing up on the market, he's just like, no, doesn't work.
Yeah. Well, and it's got to be something you're comfortable with and that you build confidence in. And I mean, I had that. Yeah. There's always a lot of talk about Leupold erectors, not being bulletproof, or people having issues. And I know people who've had issues personally.
Yeah, me too.
This scope was mounted. So this scope was mounted on a rifle I built for myself a few years ago, and it was a Kimber 8400 in 338 Winchester short mag. So I'm shooting 225 grain AccuBonds. So it's no treat for that scope to be mounted on that rifle. And I've never had a return to zero issue, or I've never had an issue dialing that scope. And I typically shoot it out to 550 at our range here.
Interesting. Yeah. Again, that's another big rabbit hole for sure.
It is. Yeah. We're kind of getting off. Yeah. I don't want to get off track on that one, but that's
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah. So back to the game plan and strategy. So you spend a little more time early season trying to figure out where they're going to be pre-rut and stuff. Any other tips as far as the scouting an area would go and trying to learn an area strategy-wise, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think the thing is really time. Once you're in good sheep country, to learn it well, it all comes down to the amount of time that you're capable to put into it. It's very difficult to have success by just going hunting. I'm going to go hunt for 5 days this year, right? And you don't scout, you don't do anything, you just show up.
Yeah.
At least in Alberta, it's all about learning the patterns, figuring out where the prime summer range is, figuring out where the pre-rut and rut and winter range is, and piecing that all together. So the biggest thing is, how long are you willing to put your boots on the ground for and spend time in sheep country?
Yeah, it's interesting. When we were in Alberta there with that whole crew, had a conversation with one of the Wild Sheep Foundation Alberta guys, and we were talking about it. And I think Wasey's pointed this out too. He said, it's no secret where the sheep are, right? Like, if you're a sheep hunter in Alberta, the spots, like, the ranges, all that. But the real trick is not learning where they are, it's learning when they're there, right?
Yeah.
And when they're probably going to show up there, which sounds to me like the probably the hardest part, right? You, like you said, you invest in
Absolutely.
an area, get in there, and 5 days, nothing, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. And I mean, starting out, I had so many fruitless hunts, but eventually you spend enough time, or you hunt with buddies who you can split that up into, share the scouting and piece it together as a group. Yeah, but it really comes down to learning the area. I mean, I think that's got to be one of the biggest challenges with hunting in northern BC. Not to change the topic, but it's a huge commitment to get there, and I'm sure you're hunting new areas or areas you haven't been, and right, it's I'm sure it's a bit of a crapshoot.
It is, yeah, and you might get lucky and just pick a lake on a map, fly in, hike up a mountain, spend a few days, and shoot a ram, and that happens a lot because there's a lot of sheep up there. But in our case, I'm not going to say too much, but Blake and I are hunting the same area going in for 3 years. We're learning the area, we're learning the little things about what
Nice.
the sheep do in there, and the country too, right? I mean, it's so extreme when you get in these areas, and nowadays things like water, your access, all that stuff, it's so important for sure. I was just going to say, I know, we were going to talk a little bit about hunting the fringe areas around all these parks and stuff. That must be challenging, because I know a lot of guys will, like you said, camp out on the boundaries, right, and watch rams inside the park and stuff.
Oh yeah. I mean, early season, there are some great boundaries to hunt. I typically don't hunt them because they're very busy, and I just I don't want to compete with a whole bunch of guys. But some friends of mine have been very successful in some of these areas, at the opener. Same as late, there are lots of people who know the more productive spots. The interesting part, though, is generally they will be very busy if the weather is decent.
Yeah.
Right. Like I've been in some of these spots, and you are going to see, it might be a valley that's 8 kilometers long, 10 kilometers long, and there's 8 different groups in there.
Wow.
And there's just people everywhere. But you get the weather, you might see one other guy.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very weather dependent. It really determines the amount of traffic, because a lot of people just aren't willing to put up with that, and that's good.
That's awesome. Well, I think we've covered the strategy and stuff, and what's involved. Last question for you with that, and then we're going to switch gears a little bit. What's your best piece of advice for a late season sheep hunter, someone who's new to it?
Best piece of advice. I don't know. Work on your mental toughness all year, because you're going to need it.
There you go.
I think that's truly it. The other aspect to that is you want to hunt the late season, just do it. The weather looks scary, whatever. If you got to go home and retool or do something different, the more time you spend doing it, the less of an issue it becomes, right? It just becomes normal. I remember when I started out sheep hunting, I used to think it was, guys are out in their tent at -20 and staying on the mountain. That's crazy. Well, it's really not if you're prepared for it, and you've got the mental game for it. The more you do it, the easier it becomes. So, obviously you don't want to be foolish, but put yourself out there and go get after it.
Yeah, exactly. You won't know until you try it, and you're going to learn something for sure,
Yeah,
right? And if you like
100%.
adventure, this is the time to get the adventure.
Absolutely.
Um, this is kind of an interesting question for a guy who's building a brand new rifle system with, well, posted 3 different calibers, but we all know there might be a 4th one available if
Oh,
you're.
it's on the website now.
It's on now, so it's
It's there.
official.
Yeah.
Official.
Yep.
Okay.
You
All
bet.
right. So Brecken's asking, what cartridge does Mike think is most versatile for sheep hunting?
Honestly, you're not going to get a great gunwriter response from me. My opinion is I really don't care what the cartridge is. Like any modern center fire cartridge is absolutely capable and versatile in sheep country. Sheep are not hard to kill. Um, put a fairly, go with a lighter bullet. I have a buddy who hunts basically hunts sheep with a 308. A lot of people poo-poo 308. I mean, to me, it's a highly versatile cartridge. Doesn't shoot the flattest, doesn't hit with the most energy. The biggest thing I've noticed over the years, far beyond cartridge choice, is, how well does your rifle system fit you? How well do you shoot your rifle in field positions? Can you get your rifle stable? Those are, to me, those are the bigger questions.
Mm-hmm.
You know, cartridges are great. That's like the never-ending subject, right? We could talk about that forever. What's the best or most versatile for sheep hunting? But I would say, if you can get anything that shoots relatively flat, and so we're talking, 6.5 Creedmoor, anything 308 based on up, you're going to be just fine.
Yeah.
I wouldn't recommend anything below that class of calibers for sheep hunting, but really nobody's using anything like that anymore anyway.
Yeah.
So it's kind of pick your poison. Ultimately, whatever rifle you can shoot the best, and I think if you're capable, even out to 400 and in, I haven't actually seen a ram taken beyond. I think the farthest has been 320 yards.
Mm-hmm.
And granted, that's a small number. It's not like I'm a guide or anything, but there's 5 rams in there that to be accounted for, and they've all essentially been, the 320 was the exception. The rest have been probably right around the 200-yard mark. So, it's not like you need anything special for most situations.
Yeah, somebody asked me, what's your comfortable range for sheep? Well, like you, I'm kind of that 500-yard mark. If I'm proficient with my rifle at 500 yards, this is my personal opinion. Shoot me down if you like, but if you can kill, you got to find your own personal effective range, and then make sure you're comfortable with your rifle. And more importantly, I think for me, I want to know what my rifle does to 600 or 700 yards, especially in sheep country. Because if I make a bad shot or I misjudge the wind and I shoot him in the back leg or something at 420 yards, and then the crest of that mountain he's climbing is 750. Well, I'm lobbing shots at 750 to try and put him down, right? Like I think that's a difference. You don't hear a lot of people talk about that, but
not anymore. And I think the important piece here that we should talk about as well when we're talking, a distance we're comfortable shooting. At what distance are you comfortable aging that ram?
True. Absolutely true.
Are you going to get a good look and the look you need at 500 plus yards? I mean, I'll tell you what, I can see a lot more at 200 yards through my spotter than I can at 5. It gives you that confidence in what you're looking at, right?
Yeah, I think it's important. It's a good segue, Mike, to talk about aging sheep in your region. You guys have your regulations are quite a bit different than ours, and I know another tidbit that we picked up, like if you recall, Alberta had one illegal ram last year, like illegally taken, misaged or whatever. Wasn't that what they said at that one seminar? It wasn't very
I'm
many.
not sure. I don't remember, but
Yeah,
I don't
quote
think
me
it
on
was
that.
many. Yeah.
It was a handful. I think it shocked the room, and there was a significant larger amount taken last year. There's some sheep aging seminars going on. There was one in Abbotsford last night, and there's some money being spent in BC on education again, and we're trying to make sure we're a part of that as well. But we definitely had a lot more young rams or misjudged rams taken last year and seized for a number of reasons. What are the regs out there? How does it work for you guys?
Yeah, so generally, we're talking 4/5 curl here. So Alberta instituted a new jig measuring system 2 or 3 years ago now, and so it's still 4/5, but how they square your ram and the jig is slightly different than they had in the past.
Okay.
So 4/5 is essentially, drawing a straight line. So if your ram is in profile, you're drawing a straight line from the front of the horn base past the front of the eye, and that straight line, the horn has to pass through it. So that would be considered a 4/5 ram.
Okay.
We do have a full curl zone as well in the province. But I think aging sheep on the hoof, when we're talking bighorns, is challenging. Once you get past that 7 to 8 years of age, it becomes really hard to see the age rings. I remember looking at a ram. This is quite a few years ago now, but we watched this ram from 500 yards. It was last week of the season. We could only get 8 years on it. The next year we were in there again, and at the same time as some horseback hunters, it was a crazy blizzard. They wound up killing that ram. It was in the same place the following year. It was 12. But
Wow.
just, those age rings stacked up at the hairline that you can't see. It makes aging those older rams a real challenge.
Yeah, I mean, we had rams all over this event. There was heads everywhere on every table, and we had some they had some massive sheep there for this event.
Yeah.
And there's no way you can't age them. With rings, you pretty much have to be a biologist and just have your hands on these things every day to be able to do it. So I can understand why the regs are set up the way they are, right?
Yeah.
They're just so hard to judge. Well, interesting stuff. Let's talk about some stories now. I'd like to hear a couple stories. Tell us about. I'm going to throw a curveball at you. Tell us about your first one, the lessons learned, and how that went, and then we'll go from there. I'm going to bug you for 3 if we have time.
Sure. Yeah. So the first one would have been you're asking about my first ram?
Let's call it your first ram. Yes, let's go with that. I was going to say first sheep hunt, but I think you've told us that before. So let's go with ram.
I don't need to repeat some of those early stories. You know what? Well, let's talk about the second ram. The first one was an early season opening day ram. But so 2012, I was out on a solo hunt last week of the season. I had 2 tags in my pocket. I had a mule deer tag and a sheep tag, and packed into an area. Found some tracks going deeper into the mountains, up high, just above tree line, and they were some good ram tracks. I couldn't get there that day. Where they went. So as I was coming down, I had the voice of my wife in my head that, the freezer is empty and you have a mule deer tag. So I came across a nice forky and, shot him.
Filled the tag.
yeah, butchered him under the moon, packed him down to the river, and then packed him out the next day, and went back in the following day. Went back to the glassing spot, and there was 4 more sets of sheep tracks going the opposite direction. So, here I was in a situation where I'm between 2 areas that hold ewes. Typically, I would call them both pre-rut range.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'm going, well, the Rams tracks that I saw first, they're probably going over to the other mountain to check on the ewes over there, and now they're coming back. So it was, 10 minutes of following the tracks, found them in the cliffs on the area that I was closer to, and there was a nice ram in the bunch. So he was full curl, right to the bridge of his nose. Basically, they worked their way as I watched them. I watched them all evening. They worked their way down the mountain further and further and further until they were essentially bedded. They bedded up right above my camp. So they were maybe 500-600 yards from where I camped. Next morning, I was on the mountain at first light, and essentially was in the perfect spot and waited for this ram to come out. Watched him through the spotter. He was clearly legal. Probably, I guessed he was 8. He was 8, 8-year-old ram. Shot him twice with a 7mm .08. The first shot was, kill shot. The second shot was just a follow-up. He was still standing, and yeah, what an awesome morning. So that was that would have been October 30th, 2012, and butchered him and packed half of him out that day, and then went back in the next day and got the other half in all my camp and packed him out. So yeah,
Wow.
it's pretty cool. 2 animals in like 4 days, and yeah,
So
lots
then
of exercise.
the wife was happy with the meat
Yeah.
issue on that one, I guess. Eh?
Totally. Yeah.
All right. Well,
Yeah.
okay. A couple questions I want to ask you on this one. So, this was one of your first solo trips, or was it your first solo trip?
I'd done quite a few solo trips before that.
Okay.
Yeah, it was actually closer to one of my last solo trips because the kids showed up shortly after that, and then things have changed a bit since then. Yeah.
Okay. So how has the gear list and the pack weight evolved over the years since those days? Any major changes there? I'm sure there's some.
Yeah, you know what? One of the biggest changes was backpacks. I went from originally I was hunting with like an external frame pack. I believe it was like a Tatanka pack. I'm sure you guys have seen those.
You bet.
That was the first sheep backpack. Then came the Mystery Ranch Nice system. So I had a nice 6500 bag. Didn't fit me really well. I wound up getting some load lifter extensions and a couple other bits on that bag, and used it for years. Used the hell out of it. It's they make tough stuff, but when I weighed, I made the mistake of weighing that backpack. It was 11 pounds.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I went to Stone Glacier Sky 5900 bag, and I basically, my pack weight dropped in half. So that was a massive upgrade. Gear wise though, beyond the backpacks, I've always used an insulated leather boot late season. I use Hanbogs religiously. They fit my feet so well and don't need to be broken in. But that's really personal foot choice.
Yeah, for
type
sure.
deal there. But you know, it's probably been a lot of the same gear, just you find the same thing only in a more modern version, like going to
Just
you know,
improved.
exactly, like the Solo titanium pot set versus, you know, where you got a mug in a 1 liter pot. You know, I run Snow Peak stuff, you know, versus when I started, I had like stainless steel MSR stuff. And so it's, yeah, it's just that the gear has come so far. It allows you the same comfort for less weight.
Yeah,
And
absolutely. It seems to never stop changing.
yeah.
It's just a quick note on stoves. I don't know why I got in the stove rabbit hole and the pot rabbit hole, but it was not intentional, but I've changed a bunch of times. And the
Yeah.
last couple of years I was running an Oli Camp system with a really lightweight little stove, and their pot has fins on the bottom of it, kind of like the
Oh yeah.
MSR reactors or whatever they're called.
Yeah.
And it worked really well, but the pot was big, way bigger than I needed. And somebody on the platform just mentioned, I think it's fire maple or something. It actually came from China, but I managed to find a smaller pot with fins. And I've
Cool.
calculated the amount of water that Blake and I use as a team and how much fuel we'll need on an early hunt. Going to always cushion that a little bit, but I think those pots with the fins on them would be a game changer for you guys on the snow melting. So
Yeah.
I'll shoot
It
you a
would
link
be.
after, and you can check that out because they certainly speed up the burn time. It just seems to work much better.
Nice.
Sorry
Nice.
for the sidetrack there, but yeah, just
That's
back
all
on the
good.
gear thing. So what was your biggest lesson you learned on that hunt? All by yourself?
Yeah, and you know what? I think not even lesson on that hunt. That hunt went really smooth.
Yeah.
It was a great hunt, but I think, you know, the years prior is it's really the mental toughness and the ability to tell yourself you need to stick it out. I've heard lots of stories about guys that, you know, oh, we saw a ram, but we thought maybe it was too far. Or, I mean, at this point, you know, I obviously won't be able to hunt as hard as I do now forever. Like
Yeah.
if I see something, I mean, there's zero excuse on getting there, right? I don't care how mountains you have to go around or how far it is. Like if it's something worth looking at, you're going. End of story.
Yeah.
And that's I think that's the number one thing you have to have in your mind, is that you're not going to be stopped when you have an opportunity, right?
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, on that note, what has been your favorite sheep hunting experience, whether it's like favorite ram or whatever? What would you say your favorite sheep is?
Oh, there's been a few. I mean, I'll maybe I'll try and do a couple real quick here. So I got a buddy of mine, Kurt, and we've hunted sheep for quite a few years together. And you know, I haven't taken a ram since 2012. I've been waiting for something, you know, really special. And anyway, so we've been focused on getting Kurt a ram, and I mean, we probably hunted together for 7 or 8 years, passed tons of sheep. You know, looked at lots of rams, done all these late season hunts, and it would have been 2021. We went out with a buddy of mine in an area that we'd never actually hunted. Day one, we get like 7 kilometers in and stop for a snack, and Kurt looks up behind him on the hillside, and we'd had some weather, right? We'd already had some good snow and good cold, and you know, Kurt turns around, and there's 5 rams. There they are. They're coming around the corner of the mountain. They're like 500 yards above us. And one look through the binos, I mean, when you see a truly good specimen, it's instant,
Oh yeah.
right? There's none of this. He kind of looks like he's got mass down low. Oh, right. This was like,
Yeah, exactly.
let's go. Yeah, let's go kill that right now. Right.
Yeah.
So we had 8 days of food, full camp, everything in the bags. The rams were on the move, so we didn't drop anything. We hiked up the mountain, probably 400 yards through a whole, bunch of nasty terrain with like 70 pounds on, and got to a spot where we could get a look at them. We could tell the ram was at least 8. He was full curl, just to pass the bridge of his nose. Lots of weight down low, and they were feeding in this little cups of spruce trees on the mountain. And so every now and then you'd get a glimpse of a body, and you couldn't tell which one was which. Yeah, it was actually the last video I posted there.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
Yeah. So I videoed that for Kurt, and I mean, it took 8 seasons, I think, but that was his first ram, and it green scored 179 and 7/8.
Smoker.
9-year-old, just an absolutely beautiful sheep. So that was a pretty special hunt. So it was funny. We packed him out. We butchered the ram, did all the prep, got down the mountain, camped the night, packed him out the next day, and then my buddy Rob and I went back in for 8 days and didn't really see much. But that was pretty awesome. And the other one that was really cool was this year. We went out, Kurt and I together. We had some really cold weather. It was in the -20s, and saw a pretty nice ram on the second day. Decided we needed to get a closer look on the third day. So we made a pretty big hike. We had lots of snow, like there was over a foot of snow. Did about 1,000-meter climb up to the top of a ridge, and we knew they were going to be close. We'd basically put them to bed the night before, and we're glassing, and here I see them in a little, come out of a little swale across the valley, maybe 1,000 yards away, and they're on their full speed lining out.
Oh shit.
And I was like, what the hell just happened? Right? So, I'm like, we crept over the skyline, like we were in the rocks. There's no way we could have blown them out, or at least I didn't think there could have been. So we watched them, they wrap the mountain, and they are like 8 kilometers away in 20 minutes, and we're waiting for them to stop. And eventually they stop, but now they're too far for today. Turns out there was a hiker there who was he was about 10 minutes ahead of us, and on skyline, and blew those rams out. So that was a little disappointing. Saw some more rams that day. Anyway, we got off the mountain, packed up the next morning, and booked it out of there. And I talked to another buddy of mine, Blaine, and he'd seen the same rams.
Wow. So was he he was hunting at the same time, and you were in region? Oh yeah.
Yeah, he'd seen the same rams. So but he was like, I don't know where they went. So I said, I got a pretty good idea. So we accessed the area from another spot, packed in, and then the next day, the 3 of us went in, about 8 kilometers in the snow, spotted the rams. Couldn't tell if the one we were after was in the bunch. We could only see some small rams. So we basically climbed the ridge of the mountain to tree line. We were at 300 yards, but only half the bunch was there. So after about an hour of this, we just kept skirting through the trees around the mountain. And here the rest of the bunch was in a little cut, kind of at the back of a waterfall, which was super cool. So we found them. My buddy Blaine liked that one. We were about 220 yards, So yeah, watched him for about half an hour until he was pretty sure he wanted to take that ram, and yeah, killed the ram. The three of us butchered it, and loaded up at dark and packed out. I think we got back to camp at 1 a.m,
Wow.
which was awesome. I mean, so last year I turned 45 last year, and at midnight we're on the trail. It's full moon. Got a ram in the packs. And it was awesome experience.
Doesn't get much better than that, right?
No, that doesn't get any better. No.
Yeah, it's pretty funny.
So,
We're pretty lucky, and then we get to talk to really dedicated hunters all the time. And there's a common thread amongst dedicated hunters when you start talking about success with their hunting partners. The really good, successful, dedicated hunters get so excited when they talk about something that they achieved for their partners, right? And that's exactly what you just described, and it's really cool. So sorry if I cut you off there, Mike, but I had to
no
I had to mention that. It's cool.
No, those were couple of my favorites there for sure.
All right, so those are the favorites. Tell us about sheep hunts that didn't go so well. See if you got a short story on one that maybe was a little scary, sketchy, or not what you'd hoped for.
Sure, yeah.
We all have them.
Oh, yeah. So the spot that I will carry rope now. When we talked about ropes
start.
earlier, I was there with a couple buddies at again, end of October. We'd had lots of snow, and we thought, well, we'll try it. You got to cross some really steep chutes to get into the area, and I mean, it was drifted in deeper than waist deep. So you basically you get out into it and you're just wallowing. And I remember we got across the first one, and I mean we're halfway across the mountain, and there was some large wumping going on when the snowpack got loaded up, and it was not safe. We shouldn't have been there. That was foolish. We had to get out. We'd almost gone across at that point, so we basically just finished the cross and had to go back. So it's snow safety is something definitely not to trifle with. That could end badly. I don't know that I've ever heard of a sheep hunter dying in a snow avalanche, but I wouldn't want to be the first. So
not so much.
No, and likewise the cattleman hunt that I got to be a part of. The sad part was I wasn't there for the conclusion of it. I had to leave a day early, but that was just a nightmare. I mean, we had over 2 feet of snow that week, and anywhere you went, it would blow in at night. So the next day you're breaking trail again. In thigh deep snow and -20, like talk about a grind. That was a challenge. Yeah, but pretty cool, cool country and cool rams.
Yeah, for sure. No, it just sounds to me like it's just a grind no matter how you slice it in the late season. But it sounds awesome, actually. Well, we've been blowing through time as we always do on these, and it just wouldn't be right if I didn't ask you, Mike, what's the latest update on production of the Zenith rifle system?
Yeah, no, good question. So basically, all the aluminum parts are ready to be anodized now. They're all finished machined and tumbled and ready to be hard anodized. The receivers are in EDM right now, so electron discharge machining. So I actually made a post today showing the wire doing the lug raceway cuts there. So yeah, they're almost done, and then we've got the bolts and the shrouds, which are probably 70% finished now. So it's there's some finished machining to do and anodizing and nitriding of parts, and So hopefully, the production run is really, we're down to weeks away, not months at this point.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you're talking to a very excited customer, because a lot of people know here that I've got a rifle on order with you, and I just
Yeah.
want to talk about that for a minute. I mean, when we first started talking, there was your three available calibers. You had
Yeah.
6.5 Creedmoor, 708, and 308, and you and I had gone back and forth about trying something a little bit different. We've threw out a few different calibers, and you actually planted the seed back in my head and said, what about the 284 Winchester? Because there's a bit of a cult following, if you want to call it that, amongst competition shooters and such, where they use that rifle in a long action. Maybe tell us a little bit about the sort of the thought process on that. And this might make you might be selling a few more 284s after this, but that's what my rifle is going to be, is a 284 Winchester.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of folks are probably familiar with Melvin Forbes and new ultralight arms. Ultimately, that caliber was, as he's said in the past, that was his really what got him off the ground. I don't think I didn't really take that to heart. I honestly didn't know how much of an appetite there was for that cartridge, but it turns out there's quite a bit of appetite for it. The two shows I did in the winter, as well as multiple people I've talked to, are you going to make one in 284? And it's almost, it's truly meant to be. I mean, the action design and the barrel shank design essentially max out with the 284 case. So it's a perfect fit. The magazine's 3 inches long. So if you're talking maximum performance out of the platform, the 284 Winchester is it. I'd never owned one myself. I've only read a lot of good stuff about them. So it was like, well, here we go. Let's try and design a magazine that's gonna fit the action as it sits today, and fit the stock and feed properly. We had to modify the receivers a little bit in width of the mag well to be able to receive that magazine. But I mean, it took a few rapid prototype attempts to get it nailed, but the first ones in aluminum, I mean, they feed absolutely fantastic. It's going to be a real potent combination. Yeah.
Yeah, and the interesting part of that too is when you start looking at the ballistics capability of a 284 Winchester seated out to that max 3 inches, you're starting to touch some pretty serious territory in the 7 SAUM. No, I don't want to say it's the same as a 7 SAUM, but you're nudging right up against it there, especially with the bullet designs today. I mean, if you want like you said, 500 yard and in, really, slick setup in a 4.5 pound rifle. It's going to be fun. So yeah, it didn't take, you can attest to this, but it didn't take a lot of convincing to get me to buy in, right? So
no, I think the other one we were talking about was the 7mm saw.
Yeah, that's an interesting one too. So
it is, and I've actually had a few folks ask me about that one. I mean, ultimately that one's easy because it fits in the same magazine as a 308, so it's super simple to do. But I like a challenge, so I thought I'd put the 284 out there and see if we could make it work, and it's gonna be awesome.
Yeah, there's gonna be there'll be a whole series of articles, stories, videos on Spike Camp once I get my hands on that, Bill. Anyway, well, we're running close on time here, my friend, and first of all, Blake and I both want to we can't thank you enough for doing this with us tonight.
No
It was awesome. And this is your second time on Spike Camp for a live stream, which is cool. We're going to get you back a few more times for sure, as much as we possibly can. And I'll just say this: if you're in the market for an unbelievable ultralight rifle, I've had this rifle in my hands. There's a lot more to it than the weight, the engineering that went into this gun, and the design and the thought process. If you've listened to Mike at all over the last hour and a half, hour 45, you understand where the thought process comes from. Attention to details. So thanks, Mike. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
I also want to toss a thank you out to the members who sat in tonight. Hopefully you've registered with the Sheep Camp series, so you can get your name in on the draw and for the Asiak prize package. So we have 3 more Sheep Camp live streams. We've got one tomorrow night, July 11th. Tomorrow's guest is Shane Pallister. He's coming on to talk about Desert Bighorn life, his life in a family of sheep hunters. His father was a diehard sheep hunter. There's a film as well. Blake will probably post that up that they did on a stone sheep hunt. It's probably the most watched YouTube film on stone sheep hunting. It's the epic 39-day sheep hunt on the trail of Chadwick. So Shane is going to be on tomorrow night. Really looking forward to that one. Next week, Waste Dog is going to have his buddy Tyler Friel on July 17th. That's Wednesday, July 17th. And they're going to talk about gear, dull sheep, and whatever comes up. Tyler and Lacey, if you've ever listened to those guys chat, it's always interesting. And then next Thursday, we've got Thursday, July 18th, we've got our buddy Kevin Willis here to chat about the pursuit of trophy stone rams, and this guy knows an awful lot about it. And the last thing I want to mention here, a little more housekeeping. If you haven't heard yet, Spike Camp's running a rifle giveaway for conservation. Our buddy Don Lynham built a custom rifle with Mitch Kendall. Mitch Kendall actually built it. Don put all the parts together. And it's a custom rifle chambered in 7mm PRC. The way to get entries is we're hoping people, we want to try and get people to spend some money at our 3 founding conservation partners, Wild Sheep Society BC, Wild Sheep Foundation Alberta, and the Goat Alliance. So if you purchase a membership in any of those organizations or all of them, if you upgrade a membership, if you buy someone a membership, or if you just donate cash, every dollar you spend, you get 2 entries into this draw. And we want to raise some money. So everybody get after it. It doesn't matter. Pull out your credit card, get on the website, make a donation, buy your cheapskate friend who will not buy a membership, spend $55, whatever it is, buy them a membership. We all have that friend. Anyway, the other way is part of our rewards program here on the platform. Thanks to all of you guys for engaging and participating in that. There's some rules and regulations on that, but that's also how we do it. So anyway, that's it for us. Well, thank you. Thanks again, Mike and crew.
Yeah.
We'll see you guys. Thank you. All right. We'll see everybody tomorrow night on episode 2. Have a good night, everyone. Thanks.